She was one of the 89 lost girls, came to the United States in 2000 as a refugee. After living 8 years in a refugee camp in northern Kenya, she experienced violence, untold violence, unspeakable violence as a result of a civil war. She's here to tell a story on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Remember when news was free? Be sure to check out the Newsbreak app. It's free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events. Free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. That's the free Newsbreak app. Be sure to look for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Joining us from Maryland, my home state, we have Rebecca Deng on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Rebecca is one of the 89 lost girls who came to the United States in 2000 as a refugee after living 8 years in a refugee camp in northern Kenya. She experienced untold violence, unspeakable violence as a child during the Second Sudanese Civil War. And she's here to talk about this. She's author of the book, What They Meant for Evil, How a Lost Girl Sudan Found Healing, Peace, and Purpose in the Midst of Suffering. Rebecca, thanks so much for agreeing to be on the show and telling your story. Both are very much appreciated.
Thank you so much, John, for welcoming me. It is an honor.
It's good to have you on the show. And first of all, I'm getting older. So I know you don't know anything about this yet. I know I should know about the 89 lost girls. For some reason, my brain cells have not kicked in yet, and I haven't had a chance to Wikipedia it. Can you tell us a little bit about the 89 lost girls? Because that was something that's on my radar that I should know about.
Yes, thank you so much, John. And you are not old at all. The 89 lost girls of Sudan came in the program called the Lost Boys of Sudan, where about 4,800 or 4,000 around there boys, and only 89 girls came to United States in 2000. They came as a bipartisan agreement by the U.S. government that these children need a place to be resettled here in the United States. So we came as refugees. The reason that you didn't hear about the lost girls of Sudan is that most of us girls came as unaccompanied refugee children. So we had to go through a foster care system. Uh-huh. And the media probably was not allowed to talk to us now that I look back, because a lot of the boys were on news, and even some of the boys got interviewed by Oprah because they were 18 and older. And when I read the law, it say when you are underage, you know, they need a consent from parent or guardians. And I think that's why nobody knows about the 89 lost girls of Sudan.
Now, you bring that up. I remember the lost boys of Sudan. Now that you bring that up, now I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember that. But for some reason, the girls were never mentioned.
Yes. So I think that is the reason. And, yeah, most people know about the famous lost boys of Sudan. They were in 60-minute show and were on the news, and even when the Darfur war was going on, a lot of boys were on the hill, so they had a disability. But a lot of girls, especially me, I came, and some others, I came when I was 15. So I had to be in a foster care system and was just focusing on school and was not in the media. So people are finding out, and sometimes people will even run into me at the airport, and they will say, "Hey, have you read this book called What They Meant for Evil?"
Yeah, I wrote it. I wrote the book.
Yes, and I will be like, actually, I'm the author of the book, and most people think that it is a novel. But it is not a novel. It is an autobiography. It just reads like a novel, but it is a true life story.
And one of the things that I do this thing by nature, maybe it's human nature. I tend tend to think what I went through was so bad, so tough. And then I hear stories about what you went through, what other people went through, and I go, man, I had it pretty easy. What was going on in Sudan at the time where you're displaced from was no joke.
Yes. And John, I would say that sometimes when we look into the issues of trauma, one thing that I will tell people is like trauma is being overwhelmed with fear. That's pretty much the definition of it.
Yeah.
So either you experience it here in the U.S. or overseas or anywhere, it is still trauma, and you were still feeling like you can't get out of it. So all suffering are equal. The degrees of it is just different, but I acknowledge all suffering. Yes, my suffering, especially when I heard about the war in Sudan, first time when I was about 4, that there's a war happening in Sudan. People are fighting. My father was a commander or a general in the military, so he will come home and then leave with his soldiers, and they say they were fighting war, and I was like, what is this war about? I remember asking one of my older cousins, and I said, what is this war about? And he's like, oh, we are fighting the Khartoum government, Umar al-Bashir in Khartoum. And I'm like, where is Khartoum? And he's like, oh, it's here in Sudan, but it's in northern part. And I was confused, and I'm like, so why are we fighting? Like, what is it for? And I never understood it. I just knew that there was war, and then it finally reached my village in ending of 1991. And actually, last week was hard for me when I saw the fire in California, especially when I hear the horses wheeling and the animals and cats and dogs. I was like, oh my God, bring back all of that memory, because it reached my village and the village was touched down. And for the first time, I have heard the sound of our cows. We are cattle herders, so the sound of them like boo, and then it's normal sound. And then when you just hear the animal is going, because there was like gunshots everywhere and fire and all of that, and chaos, right? Like people running, don't know where they're going, animal running everywhere. So last week brought that memory back to me. And I was like, wow, I haven't even thought about will hear those kind of desperation, the sound of disaster again, when I hear it on TV. At least I was not in California, but when I hear, where people record it, I was like, wow, that is so similar to what I've been through. So yeah, the chaos came, reached my village finally. Now I understood what war is for. I didn't know what it was fought for, or who is fighting it, or who is right or who is wrong. And then, which is like the definition of war. The war doesn't know who is right or who is wrong. They just know who got lost.
Right.
Those are the counts
and
of
unfortunately,
war.
what winds up getting lost in the whole story is the victims of the war. And you talked about you were very young when it started. You talked about your dad was in the military, and I'm sure this had a devastating effect on you. You talked a little bit about how the California fires reminded you of a lot of what you went through and what you experienced as a child. When I get that way, and granted it's different, and it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. When I get that way, I tend to get really quiet, and I need to get it back to what I call my center. And there's a lot of things I do. Is that what you do?
Yeah, when things like that come, I read a lot, and I'm a person of faith. So I do spend time reading the Bible. And now when I say I'm a person of faith, believing in Jesus Christ and believing in Him is different than religion.
Sure.
I separate those things.
Well, let's return that conversation in just a moment. We're talking with Rebecca Deng. Rebecca is one of the 89 lost girls who came to the United States in 2000 as a refugee after spending 8 years in a refugee camp in northern Kenya. She experienced untold violence and trauma during the Second Sudanese Civil War. And she's authored the book, What They Meant for Evil, How Lost Girl of Sudan Found Healing, Peace, and Purpose in the Midst of Suffering. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Imagine contacting millions of people every month using Facebook from the comfort of your home or business. How much would you increase the success of your business or service if you could do that? I do that every day, and so can you. Plus, earn a separate revenue from Meta. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Return our conversation with Rebecca Deng. Rebecca is one of the 89 lost girls who came to the United States in 2000 as a refugee. After living 8 years in a refugee camp in northern Kenya, she experienced untold violence and trauma as a child during the Second Sudanese Civil War. And she's authored the book, What They Meant for Evil, How a Lost Girl Sudan Found Healing, Peace, and Purpose in the Midst of Suffering. Before we went to break, Rebecca, we talked on something that it sounds we have like something similar we do. There's a lot of things I did to get to where I'm at today, but when I get really disturbed and I hate the term triggered, when things bring up memories in the past, number one is I learn to accept them for what they are. It's part of my past. It's not part of my present, not part of my future. But I pray, I meditate, and I get really quiet until I get back to where I feel I can be conversational with people. Sounds like you do a lot of the same.
Yes, I do. I meditate too, and I spend time, with the creator of all universe, and asking deep questions. And I know his heart is for justice and doing what is right for everybody. So I spend time on those chapters and sometimes just like thinking about it, and also with great leaders of the world. We just celebrated Martin Luther King Jr., those voices that call for what is good and what is right and what you do, and that everybody have a task and a job. Nobody is big, nobody is small to make this world a better place. So I spend time reading about those people and quotes and go for a walk and also reading.
I do a lot of the same things. And here's the funny thing. When I walk my dog twice a day, about 2.5 miles each way, and I pray, I meditate, I get really quiet. I sit there and think of people, and you said something that's crucial. It's not so much what they said, it's what they did. That's where I get my inspiration from. People like Martin Luther King Jr., other ones, man, they lived a life that I can use an example, and sometimes I fall short of that. I want to go back to your story, Rebecca, because it's a fascinating story, and quite often, and luckily so, people in the United States really don't comprehend this, and myself included. Let's start with you talked a little bit about the Civil War in Sudan. Did it have a big impact on you and your family before you relocated to the refugee camp?
Yes, it did. So when I described that chaotic attack on my village, like that night of ending of 1992, I was separated with my grandmother that raised me, because she's the main character in the book, What They Meant for Evil. So we got separated, and I came all the way. I think it took me about a year from my village in Jonglei State, South Sudan, currently South Sudan now. It took me about a year from that village, walking all the way, making my way down to a border of Kenya, which is called Lokichokyo. And we stayed there but on the way coming there, we did a combination. We walked by foot, and then sometime we run into United Nations, UN car, and they will take us, they will give us a lift, and we go to the next town. But the thing is, the war began at my village because it was a border town, and it was following us around. So sometime we will walk in zigzag and then go to this village, and then when we go to the next village, we see that it was burned down because we see bodies and everything, chaos everywhere. And then we go to the next village sometime, and the war haven't touched it yet, but people are packing to leave, So it took me about a year, and at that time I was 5 going to 6, my uncle carried me. It was also a flood season. So it was really scary because I could not, when it's like place where there's a lot of water, my uncle will have to put me on his shoulders. And then when it's a dry place, I will walk a little bit, but not a lot, maybe like 30 minutes.
You were very young.
I was very young.
That's barely out of the toddler stage, getting into the kid stage.
Yes. Yeah, so I was very young, and there was a lot of us. So my uncle would have to take turn on kid to give another person a break and let the other one walk. And also not only our immediate family now, because a lot of women in our village, their husbands were in war. They were soldiers in war. There were soldiers in war, and it had to be, they have to be helped. Some of them were pregnant. Some of them have babies on the way, like a normal life,
Right.
But now you are on a run. So that was really hard. It was the first time I have seen, like I saw a dead person, because in my culture of Dinka people, when you are a young person and somebody die, here in the United States, people can't go to the viewing of the bodies. They don't allow children to see that. You don't see dead people. It's a ceremony by older people, and you don't see that. So I didn't even know. And some of them, I remember a person, a guy, and his hair was like white, right? So I'm like, oh, grandpa, because when we know your hair is gray, you are grandpa. It doesn't matter where you are. I'm like, grandpa, get up.
Guess what you be calling me right now? You be calling me grandpa.
Yeah, I'm like, grandpa, get up. And then my aunt was like, that's a dead person. Why are you like pulling their feet? And I didn't know, and I was scared. I'm like, what? People die, and I'm trying to process like what that meant, but people are running, right? So nobody even has time to explain to me what is really going on.
Well, I'm sure you were busy. I want to recap. You're walking for over a year, to escape the violence in Sudan. Am I right?
Yes.
And I'm sure they're thinking, this is great, but I don't have time to answer a lot of questions from this 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, and the thing is like just focusing on surviving. It was surviving, focusing on surviving, making
how did people eat? How do they get the food they need, the water they need?
Yeah, sometimes we go like not having real food, and then when we go to where the UN is, or International Rescue Committee or whatever, all the humanitarian people that came, when they come, and most of it too, they didn't. It was only few that had lorries. That's why they have to take turn to pick up different people. Most of the food was airdrop because it was so dangerous for humanitarian even to get there. So the food was airdrop, and when the food is airdrop, it also did its own damage because it will fall on some people's neck and kill you and all, And but if you're lucky and land it and it's a sack of maize or what we call it here, corn, and then you can have it or millet or sorghum or rice, So we had few of that, and then the beautiful thing, South Sudan is gifted with natural fruits that grow wild. So there were mangoes, there were different fruits locally, like lang. It's called lang. I don't even know how I never seen it here in the United States. There were wild fruit. So we will feed on those wild fruit, and that was the only thing that kept us going.
We're talking with Rebecca Deng. Rebecca is one of the 89 lost girls who came to the United States in 2000 as a refugee after living 8 years in a refugee camp in northern Kenya, which we'll talk about next. She experienced unbelievable trauma as a child during the Second Sudanese Civil War. She's author of the book, What They Meant for Evil, How Lost Girls Sudan Found Healing, Peace, and Purpose in the Midst of Suffering. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to take a short break. I promise you. We'll be right back. Here's your chance to get into the ground floor, to make a donation to make the movie Gun Runner based off of the true story of now retired police detective Maria Oliveira, who shot 6 times while investigating a crime, died 3 times, brought back to life, was in a hospital for a month, rushed back to work, only to suffer a near-fatal heart attack, and then several months later, a near-fatal stroke. It talks about his recovery, his life after, and more. That's at gunrunnerfilm.com. Again, you can make a donation at gunrunnerfilm.com.
Imagine earning an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more from the comfort of your home or business, all with Facebook. That's right. Meta is paying people just like you every month. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
During a conversation with Rebecca Deng. Rebecca, man, what a story. Rebecca is one of the 89 lost girls that came to the United States in 2000 as a refugee. After living 8 years in a refugee camp in northern Kenya, which we'll talk about in a few moments, she experienced violence, extreme violence and trauma as a child during the Second Sudanese Civil War. She's authored the book, What They Meant for Evil, How a Lost Girl Sudan Found Healing, Peace, and Purpose in the Midst of Suffering. First of all, I feel really fortunate to have this conversation, Rebecca, and it's one of the byproducts of being the host of this radio show. I get to talk to people that really come through a lot. We just talked about escaping Sudan. We're talking about escaping the Sudanese Civil War. We haven't even gotten into the refugee camp. And I'll be honest with you, Rebecca, I don't think I really comprehend how unsettling life can be in a refugee camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we were leaving Sudan chaotic a whole year, probably took us a whole year. Now we find ourselves at the border of Sudan, back then, currently South Sudan and Kenya. And when you are in a border of a different country, now you have to be identified. Who are you? Why are you trying to come to Kenya? And we had to live there in Lokichokyo, a place called Lokichokyo, for a whole month while our status is being discussed exactly like what's going on. And then we were told, now you are a refugee, and we were given an identification card. And it's a card that is identified to you, and it just have a number. It doesn't even have name. And I remember asking my uncle, which I discussed in the book, and I say, what is a refugee? And he's like, it's somebody that is kicked out of their country because of the race, because of the belief, like religion creeds, religion belief, ethnicity, and political view. And I'm like, but it didn't make sense to me. But I'm like, but I'm not a refugee. My name is Rebecca Nyanun Denga. Well, and I count like how I was taught to count my genealogy to 10. That's the Dinka way of doing.
Right.
Because they teach all of children to count their genealogy, because when they go to the stage of courting somebody, that person will count the genealogy, and you will. And if you meet in the middle, you will know you are related, and you can never date each other. So it's the only way of Dinka of teaching the young people to know their genealogy. So I counted my genealogy to 10. And then my uncle said, it doesn't matter. You are a refugee now, and this is your card. And I'm like, no, but I'm not a refugee. And, but anyway.
How old were you then? You were 5 turning on 6, or you just turned 6?
I was 5. I will turn 6 right away when we enter into Kakuma. So in Lokichokyo, the UN lorries came, and then they picked all of us up, and we were settled in a place called Kakuma refugee camp in northern Kenya. We were the first resettlers of that refugee camp, which is still running today. I just remember arriving in a refugee camp. The refugee camp was not prepared. It was a desert. There was no trees. There were no water. There's no river. This is a girl that grew up on a Nile, on a suit in a place called Kupadia that was lush. And now I'm in a place, there's no fruit. There's no running water. There's no electricity. There's no houses. We were given 10. And it was 110 degrees. So when you put down a 10 and you enter inside the 10, you just start dripping. And I describe that in my book. The only thing we see, the only water we saw was our sweat and our tears. People were crying. Like, why are we in
I
this
can only
place?
imagine that. The hopelessness. And you were there for 8 years. You went there at 5 and you left at 13, 14, right?
Yep, I went there at 5 and going to 6, I turned 6 right away. And then I was there from 6 years old to when I came to the U.S. When I was 15 years old. So slowly the UN bring water. They bring water in jerrycan. They call it a jerrycan. It's like a bigger bottle.
Right.
And then we drink those water, and they give us rice and bean, and people start cooking. And then slowly they drill boreholes where people can, and they divided people. People went to different groups. I was in group 32 in Kakuma refugee camp in zone 3. So they zone people, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and within each zone is a group. So I was in group 32 in zone 3, and we have a borehole. But you have a borehole in that place for maybe, I don't even know how many people were there, but I would say over 600 people. We have to share that same one borehole to go get water. So there's a line. You have to stay in a long line to get water, and a long line to go get food, and a long line to do anything. So that was my
I got to interrupt you here. And this is a thought that comes to my mind. On the way here to the radio station to do the interview with you, I must have passed 2 Dunkin' Donuts, a couple of places. There's so much available that I don't partake in. Fast food. Food is like not an issue. Water is not an issue for people here in the United States. But for you growing up and then being in the refugee camp, it was an issue, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a huge issue. And also, so like when somebody became a refugee, I had a normal life in my village. My family was wealthy. So I ate food. I ate breakfast, lunch, dinner every day. And then now I'm in a refugee camp and have nothing. And you will have like that scoop of rice and bean, and it's supposed to last you 15 days. So, of course, it run out. But you know, as life start coming to Kakuma, we start going to school, which is like we will label the sand, we will label it and write our ABCDs, because there was no
on the sand you would have to write.
Yeah, and now they say, oh, you guys have a refugee school, but there were no exercise book, there were no what we call notebook here. Back then they call it exercise book because it was a British system. And no blackboard or whiteboard or chalkboard that people write on. So for a couple of months we wrote on the dirt. We learned our ABCD writing on the dirt, and then slowly refugee school were built. And now we have to go and sit in, but sometimes it's one teacher for over 100 students, and maybe it's only 5 desks in there. So some people sit down, some people stand up, some people even stand outside and look through the window to see what the teacher is teaching. So
I don't know that I would have, if I were you, I don't know that I'd have a lot of patience with people complaining about what they got to go through here. This was not that long ago. This was in 2000 when you came. So it was
in 2000. Yeah.
Here's the thing that baffles me, and maybe this will show my ignorance, but in certain countries in Africa and certain countries in Central America, I'm sitting there wondering, how is it that these people constantly get dictators and get the short end of the stick constantly? It never seems to end.
Yeah. Well, it's like it all go to, like war, and war does a damage that is so hard to reverse. Like I talk about that in my book. If there's a way to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
Because the damage that it does to people is irreversible. And
I don't think, Rebecca, anybody survives unscathed. They all you're a casualty.
And even if you are surviving, you have wounds.
Right. You have mental wounds or you have physical wounds. It's not like...
Yes.
It's not like anybody gets off scot-free. We're talking with Rebecca Deng. Rebecca is one of the 89 lost girls who came to the United States in 2000 as a refugee. After living 8 long years in a refugee camp in northern Kenya, she experienced violence, unspeakable violence, and trauma as a child during the Second Sudanese Civil War. She's author of the book, What They Meant for Evil, How a Lost Girl Sudan Found Healing, Peace, and Purpose in the Midst of Suffering. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We're going to take a short break, return our conversation with Rebecca in just a few moments. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Think of Facebook as the world's largest marketing platform, and most of their features are free. Facebook has more than 3 billion users worldwide, and more than 68% of them use the platform every day. Learn how to work smarter and get maximum engagement. Plus, many people can earn a monthly income from Meta. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Remember when news was free? Be sure to check out the Newsbreak app. It's free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. That's the free Newsbreak app. Be sure to look for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Return conversation with Rebecca Deng. Rebecca is a fascinating story. Fascinating story. She is one of the 89 lost girls who came to the United States in 2000 as a refugee. After living 8 long years in a refugee camp in northern Kenya, she experienced unbelievable trauma as a child during the Second Sudanese Civil War. She's authored of the book, What They Meant for Evil, How a Lost Girl Sudan Found Healing, Peace, and Purpose in the Midst of Suffering. Rebecca, when we talk, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, you're in Maryland. You're not far from BWI Airport. I understand the accent from my police days. It's not a big problem. But it's like you tell stories about what you went through, what your family went through your childhood, and it's totally unimaginable to me. And I don't have anything to compare it to. I don't have a point of reference. And earlier I said, I don't know if I'd be patient with people that complain about what they got to go through. Just the lines to get food and water. And you know it's not enough to make it through what you got to make it through. But that's what you had to do. And now you're in the United States. How old were you when you finally got here?
I came to the U.S. when I was 15. I landed the very first plane that brought the lost boys and lost girls of Sudan. I was in that very first flight. It landed in November 6th. 2000, and I was 15. I turned 16 that December. So I landed in Grand Rapids, Michigan, at the airport, and I just remember getting out of the airplane because we went from Nairobi, Kenya, somewhere to Europe. I think either Belgium or it was the Netherlands. I can't remember because we had to have somebody to translate because this was my first time to be in an airplane. So we had to be escorted by a travel agent, I think. So I went from Nairobi to Europe to New York. And the only thing I saw when I was landing, when our plane was landing, I think it was JFK Airport, and I saw the Statue of Liberty. And then I'm like, oh, I'm in United States because our book, it's a Welcome to United States, it have a Statue of Liberty on it. And I just remember, just keep looking at the Statue of Liberty. I'm like, she's a woman. And for some reason, I remember my grandmother, because every time my grandmother will give me a dream when good things are happening. And I'm like, I will be okay. I will be safe. So we landed in New York, and then I took off to Chicago, and then finally Grand Rapids, Michigan. And getting out of the airplane to the airport, it was so much light. That was my first impression. I'm like, oh, I can't even keep my eyes open. I'm like, it's so light and it's at night and it's bright. And then we enter into arrival place, and it was a sea of white people. I have never seen so many white people.
I see so many white people every day. I see myself in the mirror and I go, oh my God, that guy is white. But it's, the funny thing, Rebecca, is, and I think you alluded to this, when you came here, you didn't speak English.
Yes, I did not speak English. I only knew a few words like he, she, boy, girl, and I could say
Well, that'll
hello,
get you real
sir.
far. That'll work really. He, she, boy, girl. Yeah. What do you want,
exactly.
lady?
It would get me. Yeah, exactly. So I remember just seeing like a sea of white people. They all seemed to be blonde and blue eyes, and then somebody came toward me, and because we had our name on our back, and then it's like, Jambo habari yako, and it's like, hello, how are you in Swahili? And my eye just dropped. It's like, oh, mimi ni Lennis. It's like, I'm Lennis. Blah, 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 probably saying that I'm your foster dad. And then Rachel, habari yako Rebecca, karibu, welcome in Swahili, Rachel. And then another lady. So I was like, okay. So we get in a car, and I'm like, where is Bethany Christian Services? Because it had say on our thing, our sponsor organization for a settlement is Bethany Christian Services.
Right.
So I thought Bethany Christian Services is the family we're going to. And they say, no. They're trying to explain Bethany Christian Services is an organization, and you are going with us now.
Yeah,
because
welcome. I'm your new foster mom and foster dad.
Yes.
And here's the thing that gets me. And number one, not understanding the language is one thing, and having someone speaking in your native tongue, I think would be great. But when you feel like you've got no decision making, even as a youngster at 15, 16 years old, you have no say-so on where you're going to live. That's got to be a pretty powerless feeling.
Oh, yeah. And the thing that was shocking, because we saw Bethany Christian Services in both of our bags, the people we were traveling together, we thought we were going to the same place. But we got split up that night at the airport, not knowing the address that the other person is going or what's going on or what. That was traumatizing, actually, now that I think about it, because these are the people I knew back in a refugee camp. They say on our back, Bethany Christian Services, so that we thought we're like, yeah, we're going to live together. And then now we arrive at the airport, and each person have their own foster family picking them up. So I went back home that night, and we had to drive. And then they say, oh, this is the airport in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We are driving to a place called Holland, Michigan, which is on the other side of the Lake Michigan.
And they didn't tell you how cold it got there in the wintertime, did they?
And they did tell me how cold it gets there. So I'm like, okay. And I just remember we arrived, they opened the door, and a big German lab, a dog, started running toward us, and I thought it was a bear.
Oh, my goodness. Rebecca, here's what's fascinating about your story. And, man, we could spend so much time, but I really want to get into what you did to build the life you have today, because it's impressive. And I can't imagine where you came from, but there had to come a point in maybe this is say your late teens, early 20s, where you decided, I want to create a different life for myself, for me, my family. How difficult of a process was that for you?
Well, my main thing of coming to United States and why I choose to be separated from my family, my uncle's family, was education. So education was my main goal. So when I arrived, I went to Holland Christian High School, and I think I was the only student in my class, in ESL class, because I didn't know English. So my teachers had to read me magazine and books and things like that for the entire month, and then giving me some tests. I was better in writing than speaking. Yeah. And then I say that I have a goal in 6 months. I want to be able to join regular classes. Like I will still have my ESL class teaching English as a second language.
By the way, your English is very good, and you speak Swahili as well?
Yeah, I'm forgetting it now, but I used to
Trust me, I forget a lot of stuff. I forget why I walked in the kitchen.
I understand Swahili, a little bit of Swahili, a little bit of Arabic, and I speak Dinka fluently.
Well, your grasp of language is a lot better than mine. Look, I speak English. I do that poorly. I don't speak any other language, so don't make excuses and apologies for yourself. You did great. I wanted to change focus. We're running out of time. You wrote this book, What They Meant for Evil, How Lost Girl Sudan Found Healing, Peace, and Purpose in the Midst of Suffering. How old were you when you decided to write this book?
Probably was in my late 20s, almost going to. So 39 now. I wrote it ending of 2016. That's when I started writing it.
And it's really an autobiography about what you went through.
Exactly. So I wrote it first as a diary. So I would write in my book. And one time, one of my friends came for a holiday for Christmas and was asking me, what are you doing these days? And I told her that I've been writing. And I say that, you know what, I've been writing a lot. And every time it's an event happen and it trigger what I've been through. Because I think as human beings, what we're trying to do when we have been through traumatic thing, either we try to forget it or not think about it.
Either block it away or try not to respond, and those don't seem to work.
Yes,
Rebecca, we're going to wrap up. She is the author of the book, What They Meant for Evil, How Lost Girl Sudan Found Healing, Peace, and Purpose in the Midst of Suffering. Thank you so much for telling your story. Thanks for being guests on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Both very much appreciated.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate you.
Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.